As chair of the SAU 21 Joint School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the SAU 21 Joint School Board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 646-876-9923 and webinar ID 852-895-12117, or by clicking on the website address, which is listed on the agenda. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom or telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the website of the SAU 21 office at www.sau21.org. If anybody has a problem, please call 603-926-8992 extension 103 or email at revans@sau21.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law.
Greg Parrish.
Present, family in and out.
John Bailey.
Present, family in and out.
Jill Swayze.
Present and families around.
Anthony Lang.
Present, family in and out.
Jason Farias.
Present, alone.
Greg Duffy.
Here, alone.
Tom Von Jess.
Present, Marianne Von Jess is in the room.
Nermina Peterson. Is Nermina here? All right, I'm going to mark her absent. Cindy Burke.
Present. Bill Burke may be in and out of the room.
Okay. Martin Tavishian.
Present with family.
Mike Rabideau.
Present, alone.
Jessica Brown.
Present with family.
Forrest Carter is absent. Kelly Hume. I'm sorry, Kelly Huber.
Present with family in and out.
Jen Hubbard.
Present with family.
Jim Kine.
Present and alone.
Sharon Gordon.
Present, kids in and out.
Becky Burdick. Did Becky come back?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry. Present in family in and out.
Okay. Henry Marsh.
Present and family in and out.
Leslie LaFond.
Present alone.
Tony Delano.
Present with family in and out.
And Heidi Terracina.
Present with family in and out.
Okay, I have the roll call taken.
Great, thank you, Rhonda. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from December 17th, 2020. Does anybody have any comments, or can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 17th, 2020.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you.
And that was Jill's at second?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Greg
There.
Parrish.
Yes.
John Bailey.
Yes.
Jill Swayze.
Yes.
Anthony Lang.
Yes.
Jason Farias.
Yes.
Greg Duffy.
Abstain.
Greg Duffy.
Abstain.
Okay. And Tom Von Jess,
Yes.
Cindy Burke,
Yes.
Martin Tavishian,
Yes.
Mike Rabideau,
Yes.
Jessica Brown,
Abstain.
Kelly Huber,
Abstain.
Jen Hubbard,
Yes.
Jim Kine,
Yes.
Sharon Gordon,
Yes.
Becky Burdick,
Yes.
Henry Marsh,
Yes.
Leslie LaFawn,
Yes.
Tony Delano,
Yes.
and Heidi Terracina.
Yes.
I have the vote recorded and I'm almost in board docs, so.
Okay. Thank you, Rhonda. Next on the agenda is public comment. I believe the process we're going to do here is for the attendees, if you do want to make a public comment, to raise your hand and then we can let them in. But prior to that, if somebody does want to make a comment, there's our kind of policy that I'll read just in the event people do have public comments. So why don't we see if anybody does, and I'll read the policy if there are people to talk, but if not, we could probably skip over the policy read.
So I don't see anyone with their hand raised at this time. If you're an attendee and you'd like to speak, use the participant panel and there's a raise your hand button underneath that menu. I don't see anyone raising their hands. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I do see. Oh, they took it back. It was there and then they took it back.
Oh, let's give it
Okay.
another minute.
Yeah. Caroline, if anybody does raise their hand, there is a feature that you can just give them permission to speak without bringing them in as a panelist.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand. So why don't we move forward then on the agenda?
Okay.
Next is the reopening update.
Yes, I'm happy to provide an update. Thank you very much. As of January 11th, we've had the opportunity for all grades, pre-K through 12, to be learning in person to some extent. Either in everyday or hybrid. All of our grades in SAU 21 are in buildings. Northampton, grade 6th, 7th, and 8th started hybrid. Seabrook Middle started hybrid, and Winnicott High School. I also want to mention a couple highlights. Winnicott's winter sports are underway: basketball, unified basketball, wrestling, hockey, skiing, track, all going strong. Lincoln Ackerman has an ice rink now, which will no doubt be solid ice by Friday, in my opinion. It's going to be 15 degrees, so it's good timing. That's pretty exciting. And Seabrook Elementary, Barnard, and RLA are going strong. So as far as the state of COVID-19, we do have some exclusions in our schools, especially after the holidays. However, New Hampshire has had the lowest active and new case totals since December. This week have been the lowest since December. The vaccine rollout, although we were disappointed that educators are not on the list until March in phase 2. We do have educators and employees who have had the first dose. Our nurses, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists have all had at least their first dose, if not 2 doses of the vaccine. Also, another sign of light at the end of the tunnel, the quarantine rules just changed for exposure or travel, just 2 exceptions to the rules, in that if you have had a positive COVID test in the last 90 days, you do not need to quarantine if you've been exposed or you traveled out of New England, or if you are 14 days past the second dose, your second dose of the vaccine. So the nurses see this as the light at the end of the tunnel. I see this as one little little ray of light, so I'm going to take it. I know that Lonza Biologics is releasing 4.5 million doses of the vaccine every week. So this is good news. As far as looking ahead to more reopening, we're looking ahead to trimester 3, which will be here in just under 2 months. So we're starting to look at that and we're starting to plan. We're going to reach out to all parents by the end of next week with instructions on how to inform us and your schools, the parent schools, if there is an intended change from remote instruction to in-person or vice versa. So based on these responses, we'll know how to proceed. Our goal remains to safely bring in students as much as possible for in-person learning. So based on the results, you know, it could mean that we need to have creative solutions for space. It could mean for staffing. It could mean for scheduling. All of these things are on the table. That's what we're going to be looking at. So parents, if you're listening, keep an eye out for that notification coming soon. In the meantime, we're planning for our second annual Social Emotional SAU-wide Professional Development Day on March 9th. That's all of our staff, everybody. The focus will be on equity, unity, social emotional wellness for staff, and how they can transfer that information to students in the classroom. We're looking forward to that. Thank you very much for this opportunity to serve you all as interim during this exciting time. It is exciting, and I'm enjoying it. So thank you. Happy to take any questions if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Arkelian? Okay, thank you for the update. I think it is great that we have all schools in some form in an in-person environment if they choose, and hopefully we'll be able to make a lot of progress over the next few months and improving that from where we are today.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, Matt, do you want to go through the finance report?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So we have attached 3 reports for you this evening. We have the year-to-date 2020-2021 expenditure report and revenue report, as well as the 2019-20 year-end audit governance letter. So the first report I want to briefly review is the revenue report. So you'll see on page 1, we do have a few accounts that we have some unexpected or unanticipated revenue. That includes almost $70,000 in a health insurance refund. I will note, however, that that's closer to $55,000 because the health insurance, so our vendor refunds the entire amount, and then it's to both the employer and the employee, and we're responsible to refund to the employee their portion. So of that, approximately 80% is for the employer, SAU 21. Additionally, there's just over $5,000 unanticipated contributions and donations on page 1. That was a grant that we applied for the food service program, and we were awarded. If you recall, I reported back on this in the summer, and that was part of kind of our overall effort to fund the summer food service program and into this fall. Otherwise, all our other revenue streams are on track. Typically, some of those, we have revenue coming for our ESOL and technology accounts that will be recognized later in the school year, but I anticipate no issues otherwise from revenue. On the expenditure side, you'll see on page 1 under improvement of instruction, professional development, we have almost $28,000 in available funds. Now this is more a byproduct of timing. These are for leadership stipends, curriculum work stipends, tuition reimbursement. Most of that's paid out towards the end of the school year. That being said, I do anticipate having some available balance at the end of the year. As we haven't incurred all of these costs, and tuition reimbursement. For example, we had budgeted for more than what it looks like we'll need this year. Additionally, under the school board services department, you'll see contracted services is over budget by $17,000. This is the result of the contract that we signed with NHSBA for the superintendent search, as well as the interim superintendent consulting that we contracted. Our legal account is over budget by $4,400. As you all know, legal can be a highly variable account that can be somewhat volatile. This past year, there's been a significant number of legal advice or recommendations that we have had to go to council on. So we specifically due to COVID, staffing, those type of ADA, like leave requests, those type of things. So we have gone over budget in legal. On the flip side, if you scroll down, still on page 1 under Office of the Superintendent, you'll see we have available balance of just over $40,000 on salaries administration. So this is the result of having one less employee that we, due to hiring the interim superintendent in-house. So we have one less salary that we're paying out, and that's somewhat offset by the payout for vacation for the outgoing superintendent. Moving along, you'll see under fiscal services, we have about $29,000 in software available. Again, this is timing. We just haven't been billed for the remaining balance for our various software. This is primarily Munis, our financial software. And you'll also see that equipment is over budget by $5,000. This is actually offsetting. This is the payout of that food service grant that we received. So the SAU received the grant, but we paid it out to the districts. So we received the revenue, but then we incurred the expenditure because it went to the districts, not to the SAU's budget. So that's that $5,100 is a result of that grant. So it's just offsets. And then if you move on to page 3, you'll see our health insurance is over budget by $24,000, and dental insurance is over budget by almost $2,000. This is merely a result of election changes. So we had budgeted for a certain number of employees to opt into health and dental, and that changed. We had one additional employee who opted in. And one final note is you'll see we have an available balance of just over $14,000 in life insurance, but then we're over budget by $14,000 in the 403B employer contribution. And this was just a result of the change in the previous superintendent's contract. As you recall, the board approved changing that compensation from a life insurance to 403B. So I will, overall, we do have a healthy balance. I do expect it to draw down as we do have another 5 months in the fiscal year, but we are in good shape for the remainder of this fiscal year. So I just want to touch upon the audit governance letter. So as you know, on an annual basis, we do contract with Plodzik and Sanderson to conduct an independent outside annual audit. This is done in all of our districts and for the SAU, and the purpose is to look at our financial controls, make certain that we are accounting for all of our expenditures and revenues, and to take a look at our financial statements for the year. They have two recommendations as a result of this audit. As you recall, we reported back the preliminary audit results back in September. So this finalizes those audit results. And again, they recommend that we update our policies, which we're all painfully aware of, and we are addressing via the policy committee. Additionally, they found that one deposit was beyond the 1 week recommended deposit time. So we should have deposited a check within a week's period. Otherwise, the audit went successfully, and we do have copies, physical copies, and we'll be posting the electronic copy to our website. So I'd be happy to answer any questions in regard to either the expenditure, revenue, or the audit governance letter.
Are there any questions for Matt? Doesn't look like we have any, Matt. Thank you for going through that. All right. So next on the agenda is new business, and so 5A is the permanent superintendent search update. David, do you want to run through this, or?
Sure. I think I've given verbal updates at our board meetings, but I can just give a quick overview for everybody. Throughout the last 2 weeks, we've assembled a committee of 16 folks from around the SAU to participate. And this is, I have to say, from over 50 parent and staff volunteers that we accumulated over our search. So the interest is out there, and I am grateful for all the interest that everybody showed. So with respect to the board membership, we've got Mr. Keim, obviously, is going to be from the Southampton board, Mr. Von Jess from Northampton, Ms. Hubbard from Seabrook, Mr. Farias from Hampton Falls, and Mr. Delano from Winnicott, in addition to staff and parents that are also on the committee. We have our first organizational meeting actually tomorrow evening, where we're going to set out some expectations for community input, focus groups, meeting structures, and all that. I think obviously two kind of sets of variables are emerging in the search process. One is obviously the characteristics of the applicant, the desired applicant. And I think the other one that is emerging is structure of the position, and how we can attract the right candidates for the position. We have a timeline roughly set out by the Bryan Group, January, February, which is this time period. We're really looking kind of internally at what we want. We're going to start doing some outreach to candidates in March, and then interviews and selection in April. One thing that I might put on the board's plate this evening is we do have that reorganization process that's coming up. And I know Mr. Keim has taken the lead role on this group. And I would recommend that he maintains that role throughout even after the reorganization process, just for continuity and consistency. So that might be something the board wants to discuss this evening. But other than that, that's where we are with the search.
Thank you, David. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, I was pretty impressed with just the number of people who volunteered. I thought it was just great to see it was actually pretty difficult. I didn't make the selections, but I thought it was must have been pretty difficult to go through. Kind of narrowing that down, and we worked with the consultant, gave us some general guidelines in his experience on kind of overall search committee size, in order to make it kind of get a broad representation, but at the same time, not make it too large where it becomes, you know, overly burdensome to get everybody together. So that was kind of the reasoning for the overall size. And I think, yeah, as David mentioned, the intent would be for me to kind of oversee the search committee side of things, even though I won't be, you know, I'm happy to step down as joint board chair after this year. And I'll be there'll be a transition period in the interim there. But I figured that just that continuity probably made sense from the search side of things. Okay, great. And this really kind of brings us to the next part, which is long range planning within the SAU. I did I did send an email to all of the board members. I BCC'd everybody just so it wasn't like a formal thing, but everybody should have received that. And it really is just, I think as we kind of went through the interim search process, a lot of things came out, you know, just, you know, as we are looking for a permanent superintendent, it really, I think there's things that we just as a board probably should at least articulate amongst ourselves and discuss. And then also, I think it's just going to be very helpful for the search committee to understand from a broad perspective what people are thinking regarding you know, a number of different topics. So I'm just going to pull up that email I sent just to talk about the meeting discussion goals. And maybe I'll just read it just so everybody you know, is familiar. I said, the past 10 months have been a stressful period for all stakeholders within SAU 21. I'm proud to see how adaptable students, teachers, faculty, staff, and administrators have been during this period. That does not mean mistakes didn't occur. It is during times like these that areas of weakness become most apparent. As we look forward, we should use these lessons to improve SAU 21. The search committee for the permanent superintendent has been formed. In advance of that search process, is my goal that we work collaboratively at the joint board meeting to provide input for that committee. And I just, there's three main topics that I would like to discuss. The first being, what qualities are we as a joint board looking for in a permanent superintendent? Second is, are there structural changes that we should consider which will better attract and retain administrators? And then third is utilizing a collaborative approach among the various school districts does result in academic programming improvements, better efficiency and economic savings, but that does come at the cost of independence. Where do we as a group want to draw the line? And I would just ask as we have this discussion, and I hope it is an active discussion, that the purpose of the conversation is not to air previous grievances. The real goal here is to discuss how we as a group of school districts can improve. So I like to open it up with the first topic, which is what qualities are we looking for in a permanent superintendent? And just so the various search committee members will understand everybody's perspective here. So I just ask, probably the best way to do this, just kind of raise your hand on screen and I'll kind of try to run through it if people, Kelly?
Maybe better communication with all board members, not just the chairman, just to maybe, so people more involved and know what's going on. Because I think a lot of times people hear things secondhand and that makes it a little confusing. So maybe better communication.
And when you say chairman, just so I'm clear, is that at the respective school board? So
yes. Yes.
Yep. Okay, that's fair. Anybody else want to go? I guess I can. Oh, John.
Yeah, I would just advocate, you know, superintendent who's familiar with a multiple district board, where we do have the 5 different districts here. It's a lot to take on, but I think that, you know, having familiarity with working with more than one district is very helpful.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. Anybody else? Leslie?
I'd like to see a superintendent with a level personality, somebody who is approachable, somebody that is kind, respectful. I mean, all the things that we seem to think, I think we all take for granted, but I think those need to be front and foremost.
Thank you. Jessica, sorry, I didn't see you actually had the hand raise function up. You want to go?
Hi, yeah, somebody who is going to be around for a while, like some longevity, and maybe politically biased, neutral.
That's a good point. Cynthia?
There, sorry about that. I think we're looking for somebody who's very visionary, somebody who will work with the board to establish ambitious goals that will improve our educational outcomes and ensure that those goals are achieved.
Jason?
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that. I think we need someone who's got familiarity with the competency-based learning and willing to bring some professional ideas and best practices to our teachers and staff in that regards.
Joe?
Related to both those points, in addition to establishing the goals, actually evaluating against them. So if we're not meeting them, why aren't we, and how can we course correct ourselves? So putting in some monitoring systems in place.
That's a good idea. Tom?
Yeah, so certainly everything that's been stated. I also think it's important that we have someone who can help us with curriculum and instructional assessment. We started to do some of that work, and I think it's important that we continue it.
Yeah, very good point. I think as I look at this, and I know some other people have their hands raised, but I want to step in on. I think the last year, obviously, the pandemic's kind of been front and forth. The most important thing, and getting kids into school safely has really driven it. I think, as Dr. Arkelian said, we're starting to see some rays of, or light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully. So the features that we're looking for in a permanent superintendent clearly are going to be somewhat more traditional and not as much focused on like the pandemic related things. So these are very good points of, just kind of stepping away from the situation that we've been in and really focusing on, what the optimal permanent superintendent would be over the next, multiple years. Clearly is going to be, I would hope to be the focus of the search committee.
Jim, can I add one other thing on there? I think we need someone who's strong on human resources and leadership around human resource as well, both in terms of hiring, making sure we have the proper training, but also just the day-to-day things that may come up in a district as large as we are.
Yeah. Anthony, I saw your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I think that a proven ability to be a creative problem solver and adaptability and willingness to change plans when necessary.
Tony?
Yeah, I like everything I'm hearing, but I have something fairly specific. I think the superintendent needs to be adept at dealing with the impacts of what has happened over the last year. Some of these kids have lost an awful lot. I've got a senior. He'll be out of the school, but I've got another one in the school. And I'm sure this is happening for many, many people. The kids there's been an impact. How do we deal with that going forward? Because, we don't get everyone vaccinated and then everything's all good. These kids have had educational and social impacts that somehow, I don't know how, need to be addressed. And the person needs to be versed in dealing with that sort of thing so we can get
Yeah, Tony, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, I think nobody knows for sure, how the past year has impacted children. I think every child will be different, but at the same time, we know there are going to be significant negative impacts. And I think that's going to be a true challenge across, every district within our SAU. Jessica Brown, I see your hands up again. I just don't know if that was left from before or not. She's off screen. Leslie, do you want to go?
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm outside.
Okay.
Just one more quick one that I think it's really important that our next superintendent is well aware of the makeup of our district and the different towns and whatnot. And I think they need to be, I don't know, I guess extremely aware of how things work, and not trying to reinvent wheels and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're going to get into that in the next topic too. But before we move forward on that, does anybody else want to give their? I'd say one thing is that I've seen just, and a lot of this predates my involvement in the school board, but we have, I think the past two have been superintendents that came out of a different state. Not to say that we should preclude anyone, but I think it also at the same time, I think they definitely need to understand who we are as SAU 21. There's a certain culture, I think, that each school board has, and then that rolls up into an SAU. And I think that's going to be pretty critical. And and as Leslie was talking about there, is really understanding that and trying to make sure that they make improvements, but we also, I don't think necessarily want to lose that culture. At least I know speaking for my district in Southampton, I know we don't want to lose kind of our culture, and I would assume that's the same probably across, each of the towns in Winnicott. Kelly?
So I'm thinking that maybe someone who can be open-minded to and be a little bit, more, not more, but be compassionate to the, parents' opinions and ideas, and try to really take into consideration what they're saying and why they're saying it. And that, especially right now, I think.
Yeah, I'd say, Kelly, when we went through the interim, that communication was the number one thing that came out. Now, clearly that is a, shorter term position, but I think that, for any superintendent, you're right. Communication is going to be paramount.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to demonstrate the ability to do that. Does anybody else want to give just their feedback on what they're? Sharon, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, again, I just wanted to say the communication, but also like the quality of the communication. I love what Dr. Kellyan's been doing with just sending out, consistently sending out the emails with resources. I think that's been really helpful, especially for me. I've taken advantage of some of those webinars and the links that she's attached, and, just giving parents some resources, and a place to go, and consistently.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's going to be very helpful. I'll probably go back and watch this to be blunt, just before, as we get into the search committee side of things. But it's just very helpful just to get everybody's opinion. I think it's there's a lot it's going to be a very important hire, and it's not something we were planning to do, obviously, but it's going to be a very important process and hire for all of us, because it's going to really help, drive the future. So I guess that kind of moves into the next part. Are there structural changes that we should consider which will better attract and retain administrators? I think one of the things that I've heard, just to kind of preface this, is I think it's got highlighted as a result of the pandemic and the number of meetings and so on and so forth. But the fact that we are a five district SAU does lead to a lot of work for administrators. And it's obviously been a stressful period and a draining process over the past year, which hopefully will get better moving forward. But I think those are things that I wanted to see. If anybody had any thoughts on, should we be considering making any structural changes, whether that be responsibilities of administrators being on all board calls, or contact kind of points. I guess the way I always envision it, the superintendent ultimately oversees everything. But I know from my town's perspective, I don't necessarily need the superintendent on every board call. But that may be different for other schools. So I just wanted to see where people shook out on that, and if anybody had any ideas. Tom?
Jim, I would echo everything you're saying, and I'd like to broaden it. I know we're talking about the superintendent search right now, but if we're making changes, I'd like to consider making more broad changes regarding the school, Matt, right, and Dr. Arkelian and Dr. Hobbs and on and on. It's a taxing time, especially around budget committee season, to be everywhere at once. So I think you're spot on that we bring the people into meetings that need to be there. And as long as we have a representative from the SAU, I think that's critical. And any board chair can always ask to have the superintendent at a meeting. Hopefully there's some rotation there so that the superintendent, she's seeing everything across over time, but everyone being at every meeting, I don't think is necessary.
Jason?
Would there be a possibility of revisiting the math behind the weighted joint board voting?
I don't know that answer.
Time to look at that.
I don't know that answer. I just don't know that answer from.
I'll put it out there for consideration.
I think that was determined at the creation of this cooperative in the SAU, and it is written into the policy. We can certainly reach out to legal counsel, see if there is any adjustment we can make, but I have a feeling that that's part of the charter of this SAU that will be very hard to change. But we'll reach out to legal and see what our options are.
Jason, can I dive into that a little though? Just what were you thinking from a reasoning perspective?
I'm just trying to reach back into some, just trying to, in this, what are some of the things that I would consider viable structural changes? And I'm just trying, and that came to mind when I think of a couple of the votes that we took as a group. And we can all remember them, the weighting, we voted certain ways, but due to the weighting, things went one or the other way. So, and that was just one of those things that just for consideration, but if it's locked in stone, it is what it is.
Yep. Cynthia?
Have we sat down with all the administrators together or done a survey to talk to them about what would be their ideal attendance and structure? Because we can sort of guess how tough this is for them, but it would be nice to hear from all of them and to see what's reasonable.
I haven't done a survey. I have had conversations. And I know this past year has been very difficult. I guess I wouldn't anticipate us to make a decision on the structure. I think the question really comes down to, are we open as a group to making those changes? Because I think ultimately that would be the charter of one of the charters of the new superintendent would be to evaluate the structure and make a recommendation to the joint board, which would, at that point be the reorganized joint board. So that whatever the next one is, which would maybe make some modifications, but it really comes down to, are we as a group structurally, like this is, we like this structure, we don't want to make a change, or is there openness to make changes moving forward? And that's really what I want to understand. And I think ultimately the new superintendent and probably the existing administrators are going to want to understand, just as they're looking at, what they're doing. Joe?
From my perspective, I think we need to be open to change and flexible, particularly as some of our boards are going to be welcoming new seats, new members, in the next few months. That and we faced, insurmountable challenges over this past year, and we really saw things that worked well and things that didn't. So I think as we welcome a new superintendent, the time is absolutely perfect for us to reevaluate what works and, out with the old and in with the new.
Henry, did you have a comment?
Yes, I'm going back on perspective. I've been on this board for 15 to 18 years. And just for a point of information, Greg Parrish has been there, Leslie and some of the others. The two superintendents prior to this, the superintendent that just left, the prior superintendent was here over 10 years. The one previous to that, pretty much the same. So there's been longevity that we've got to understand and not go to what has just occurred. Again, change is fine, but you've got to have some documentation to that change. And understand that each district is different, a different population. And again, board members, when I first came in Northampton, the concept was that you're on that board for at least 6 years, 2 terms. Don't just leave after 1 term, unless there's problems or whatever. But again, the idea of some longevity and to use this format that is presently in place, do some tweaking. I've worked with superintendents that have an assistant superintendent that takes 2 or 3 districts, or basically 2, and the superintendent would take the 3. And so there's been a lot of things that have been tried, and a lot of things have been successful. And to overwork, how can I say this gingerly, Matt's here, and I'll just use that. And I talked to Dr. Killian in our last board meeting that he's overburdened right now. I think everybody sitting here will understand that he's at meetings, and the same thing with Dr. Killian. And understand that this is right now, even though we've had, a pandemic, it's been stressful for parents, teachers, board members, and to understand that within our group, this group has been cohesive, whether people feel or not. Again, we're here not just for SAU 21, we're here for the students of SAU 21. And when you look at the accolades from each of the communities, with the blue ribbons, the state gradings and so forth, we're not doing a bad job. And again, you're looking at the level of superintendent. We've got to look at a superintendent that's looking not just New Hampshire, Massachusetts, but globally, because this is right now we're in a global situation within. So we may have people that are applying from Kansas, Nebraska, or wherever to move, and we've got to hire someone, as some of the board members mentioned, was longevity, someone that's coming here to stay. And we'll really research into what each of these boards are like. Some school districts are small, others are large. And we've got to look at that as a component. And the idea that attending every meeting, is it important? No. Some meetings, there's not much going on. And we've got to understand that. And I don't know about your board or some of the other boards, but in the summer, there's not a whole bunch going on. And to have the board, the administrators there to a July meeting, we don't have a July meeting at Winnicott. But again, it's important in August, to get everything ready. I'm sorry I'm long-winded. Jim, you're on.
Well, Henry, I thought that was really excellent and very helpful to hear because, like, for example, I only have 3 years of history here. So it's definitely great to hear that perspective. And I agree. I think one of the biggest things I'm looking for in a superintendent is somebody who is going to have longevity and, really want to put their mark on SAU 21, work with the what we have and improve upon it, but not to lose that. You're right. Every school district has its own culture, and that superintendent, I think the super definitely needs to work within that.
And the new superintendent to understand that each school district is responsible for their budget. And the concept of moving people within the SAU to other school districts, we're responsible for that school district. We hire individuals to work in your school district. They're not hired to work everywhere in the SAU. And budget-wise, in the contract is with that school district, not the SAU.
Good point. Anybody else? So if I can summarize, and please let me know if people disagree with this statement, that we are, open to making modifications within kind of the structure of SAU 21, but ultimately, that's something we would be looking for recommendations from the new superintendent on doing. And it'll be part of the criteria when we evaluate the permanent superintendent on as part of this process. Is that fair? Does anybody disagree with that?
The only thing that I wonder, and it's not that I disagree, but I wonder how we can have a role in it too, because it may be a little bit of a setup to say to a new superintendent, hey, come in and figure out what a new structure would look like. And then not everybody's happy with it. And then all of a sudden there's, some people that are happy and some people that are unhappy. I almost wonder if it's a matter of the joint board partnering with the superintendent and receiving feedback, as Cindy said, from the current administration. And maybe there was an exit interview with the last couple of superintendents too that might have given feedback, and then us partnering to make that decision rather than us having us put it on the new superintendent and saying, figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I agree with what you said. Yes, it should be a joint effort as part of his. I would imagine his or her evaluation, kind of entry plan. I would think would be to look at those and work with the existing administrators and then make a recommendation. And I think what Henry said is it really is tweaks. I don't expect there to be a massive overall here, but that's just my perspective. I don't know. But I think it's just about how to work with the existing administrators and create an environment where we continue to develop those administrators and, that they want us, stay within our SAU. And that's the goal, right? Is to get talented people and have them love their job and, want to stay with us. That's the goal. Okay, and then I kind of this, I guess the final one, which is, this came up when we were taught, as I think it might have come up in a, when we were kind of going through things, but yeah, obviously the last few years, there's been a lot of, I guess, collaboration and consolidation, I guess, for lack of a better word, kind of among within our SAU, and it's taking advantage of you know, the fact that we are five districts in order to improve the quality of education that the SAU is offering to all students. And but it does take away with some independence, right, at the board level. And I guess the question is, you know, how do people feel about that as we move forward? Is this something we want to emphasize, or not when looking for the next superintendent?
Jim, are you talking about like the shared positions throughout the SAU? Is that what you?
Yeah, we've got like shared positions, there's shared programming. There's, I mean, it definitely is, I would say today is a lot tighter of a total organization than it was 3 years ago. I guess my perspective on that was it was moving along well, but I do think that one of the things that came out was we kind of, it almost got to the point, and Jason, I think you might have been kind of tagging on this one, where we were almost acting as a collective group on behalf of each school, which I think probably overstepped the bounds. I mean, ultimately, you know, we're elected for our town. And I think that, you know, and I think, you know, I wouldn't want to get into a point where this collective group was making decisions based on, you know, for all schools, meaning at the school level. I think that ultimately has to reside at the school board. But it's not to ignore the fact that, you know, working collaboratively across all the various schools doesn't improve those schools as well. So I guess it's just a quick, you know, I want to get people's perspective. That, I mean, it was clearly a big initiative, and I don't necessarily think we need to abandon it, but I think we should talk about it and how people feel about that, and how much that should be emphasized moving forward or not. Leslie?
I think that having, as Henry said too, I think sharing personnel, things like that, that makes it difficult, first off, budget wise, you know, who's paying which percentage, those kind of things. I agree with having the districts working together for the same goals, being on the same page, so that as all of our feeder towns that are coming to say, you know, they're coming to the high school to Winnicott, you want them kind of, you know, let's get on the same level. So we've got people coming into freshman English that all have, you know, the same, we're on the same academic wise, you know what I'm saying? But yet you're still, each school is controlling their own school. In other words, just like they said earlier, the fact that as a joint board, we started voting on who was going to be in school and who was going to be out of school, I thought we way crossed the line on that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
Yeah, I just think, I think there's a definite, there was a movement to make it as one huge district, right? With just 5 towns basically. And I don't think that's, I mean, and maybe the rest of the board feels differently. I personally think it needs to stay that we do have distinct, you know, we do have distinct areas and towns. Having teams, you know, vertical teams working is great so that people can understand, and those kind of things are great. But trying to make it all one under one umbrella is, I think it's, you're looking for a disaster. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think some of the positives have been moving towards a more common calendar where, you know, the teachers are able to interact together on their days. Like those things are all very good. And I think, you know, those have been great initiatives.
I think they are, but like I said, but I think when we start making decisions as a group on individual towns, then we're crossing a line.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I don't think that culturally that's where I would want to go. John?
So just so everyone knows, I'm cycling off the board in March, so take my opinion for what it's worth. I won't be here afterwards. But I have been on the board for 6 years. I've learned a ton in the process. I'm certainly not the godfather like Henry or Greg or Leslie or others. But I think that what Bill Lapini was doing was actually great in terms of trying to consolidate us in a common set of policies and being able to share resources. And to Henry's point, like every board, every school does put their own budget together. They are responsible for that. They take that to their voters. But like it or not, whether we realized it or not, we are part of a joint board. And with that becomes a broader field of vision in terms of our responsibilities to the overall SAU beyond just our individual district. And I think that, you know, especially in areas like special education, where there's unique skill sets, where not everyone can be the master of everything. We're going to have people who are specialists in various things that can help people in other schools. Matt can come up with some very creative ways in terms of allocating costs at the end of the year in terms of sharing those expenses. And it's not complicated to do. So I think the concept of being able to share best practices, share resources, and gain the benefit of us being 5 districts. That's one of the beauties of us being a larger group, that we can do this. And, you know, it does get problematic when we're voting for other schools, but the reality is no school district in and of itself could have passed an RLA that would work feasibly. The RLA only worked when we combined all our 5 districts together. And not every school liked it because some people lost some of their great teachers and they weren't in the building anymore because they were part of the RLA, but it made it work for everybody. So anyway, that's just my opinion, so I'll get off my soapbox. But I'm for unification at the end of the day. And I think there's some great advantages and great strengths that can come along with it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, sorry. Armina?
Yeah, I think I would agree with John. There's definite benefits of being 5 districts. If we can utilize some of these things to our benefit, to our all school benefits, we're probably one of the smaller schools in the SAU for the Northampton. So they are benefits. And I also agree with Leslie, we do need to kind of individualize this a little bit when it comes to some of these things, that it's purely a town decision or a school's decision, where we can definitely see a clear distinction between where we could be benefiting as a joint 5 district board, and then have our own little individual decisions and things that are only affecting us or our schools and our teachers and kids and whatnot. So I definitely can see where we would benefit from sharing resources and save money, and towns love that, and comes to budgets and things like that. So I'd be in full support.
Anybody else have any comments? Okay. I think it's very helpful just to understand. I mean, I think not that it matters, but my perspective was that a lot of the consolidation efforts were benefiting us all. You know, we did have a period of time, I think, when it looked like RLA wasn't going to be feasible, where we did vote as a joint board on behalf of all schools. I regret that decision. You know, I think it was part of the first one we kicked down to each school to vote. But I still regret the decision to vote collectively, even though I think it was probably going to be the same outcome. I think it was a bad precedent. Because ultimately, we should strive to work together, but we do need to, I think, keep the school-specific decisions need to lie with the school board that was elected to represent that school, and that's something I think. So when I look forward and for a superintendent, I think that's really going to need to be articulated to them as this is what this is the the job that you're signing up for, and You need to represent, be involved with each of the 5, but we are open and hope to work collectively to benefit all of us. That would be the structure that I would recommend, and as part of the search process. And so I think that articulates what people have said, if that's kind of fair. All right, well, does anybody have any other comments? Okay, great.
I have one comment, but not related to this topic, if I may.
Sure, go for it.
A couple things. So first of all, thank you for your leadership as joint board chair over the last year. Tough year. It's actually been very amazing for me to see everything that you've gone through and how you've led us through it, and how you've grown as a leader. So I want to thank you for your service. I also want to take a second because I think there's going to be a lot of people like John who may be cycling off their school board and this joint board before the next joint school board meeting. So thank you to everybody, and thanks for working together.
Yeah, thank you all for those who are cycling off. Thank you for all of your service. Henry?
Yes, again, I would like to thank you as well. We've battled, and I love you. But I have one more thing for board members and the schools. A fellow fairly affluent fellow contacted me today. Is there any school that would like a Baldwin baby grand piano? It's free. And just get in touch with me. They're moving out of their little mansion, and they're going to a condo, so he can't take his. It's a baby grand, probably worth about $40,000, and we'll donate it to a school.
Hey, Henry.
So if there's any school interested, pardon? What's that?
We got to vote on that then?
No.
Northampton will take it.
Do you want it, Greg?
We'll take it.
Okay, I'll let him know tomorrow.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Greg.
Does anybody else have any comments before I get into the end here? All
Just
right.
want to say thank you, Jim. I think you did an amazing job this year. It was a tough year, but I think you did a top-notch job. It was great.
I drew the short straw this year, No, I really want to give, I think it's the administration and all the teachers, principal, faculty. This has been probably the hardest thing that I could ever imagine for them to go through from a professional perspective. And, like I said, this has not been a easy thing. There clearly were mistakes made along the line, but at the same time, I think they really are putting and will continue to put the students' best interests at heart. And I think I see the same thing from all the board members. I think it's kind of unfair when I see some of the criticisms out there, because I know everybody really is looking out for the kids. And so hopefully we can, keep working hard and really make it the best experience possible given the circumstances. All right. Of course, I just closed board docs. 1 second. So we have a couple upcoming meetings. 1 minute here. SAU Operations Committee meeting is going to be Thursday, March 11th. That will be, I believe, after the town votes, but before the reformation. I believe that's how kind of historically it's worked. And then there's a joint board meeting Tuesday, March 23rd, which will be, I think, the new joint board, and there'll be a transition at that period of time to a new joint board chair. Past that, SAU 21 joint board policy meeting is April 14th, and then there'll be 2 more meetings in May. There's an op committee meeting May 4th, and then another joint board meeting Tuesday, May 25th.
And Jim, if I may, that operations committee meeting, even though it'll be after the election, everybody who is still an operations committee member and you will still just attend that as you have. I think the only board that's affected would possibly be Winnacunnet, but they can make a decision on that at their February meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda.
Motion to adjourn?
Can I get a second? Leslie seconds.
Second.
All right. All in favor, just give a wave. I don't think we need a roll call. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.